Good afternoon and welcome to today's tarot reading. Today we're looking at when enthusiasm becomes the key to unlocking new possibilities. So, what grounds and sustains your commitment and engagement? Sometimes it can be really difficult when we feel the enthusiasm, that kick of enthusiasm towards the possibility of something, and it can take a lot a focus or grounding, I guess, to be able to sustain the enthusiasm, especially when you hit the walls or you hit some kind of difficulty that has the possibility of, bursting the bubble of enthusiasm. And usually, if there's no enthusiasm, if there's no like emotional engagement past a certain point, it becomes really hard to sustain commitment and to remain engaged in something that you might have been really passionate about. And so this is kind of the focus of today's reading. I find it interesting that, when we are enthusiastic about something, there seems to be unlimited potential, unlimited possibilities. And so it really does make us give us a superpower almost of curiosity. And so there's just seems to be something in that initial spark of the enthusiasm that we get when we see the potential for something. And that spark seems to ignite like fires in us. And when we have that, like we want to learn more, we want to see more, we want to experience more, we want to be more, we want to add more to our existence. And that can be both exhilarating and depleting depending on how we're engaging with it. The hardest part about it is when we step into the exploration of new possibilities, we have to accept the fact that some possibilities are meant to just be that, possibilities. They may be there for someone else to unlock and for somebody else to follow, but for us, they might just be something that triggers curiosity into a different direction. And so most explorations that we go on, they will test your capacity for sustainability. They will test your capacity to remain committed to something that, even if there's struggle, even if there's challenges, even if there's difficulty, that you will still be able to find that spark of the enthusiasm that got you going in the first place. The journey we take to explore new possibilities can also find us drawing on our past experiences because most of the time we are building on skills that we've been looking at. We're building on things that we have wanted to explore before. And so the potential and the possibility comes from where can I go next? How can I use this to make it something else? And we can begin to see how we can share what we've learned over time or find ways to explore different avenues, different ways of stepping out of patterns, of stepping out of habits, of stepping out of stories, so that we can really start to step into fulfilling those roles that the potentials are opening up. It's important to remember that each new possibility we unlock requires time and space to practice and refine. Nothing comes out of the can, so to speak, fully ready to be used or eaten. So when we allow ourselves to let go of the need for perfection, for perfect timing, for perfect people, places, if we can let go of the idea of perfection in and of itself, then we can relax into the process without the fear of burning out or losing that initial enthusiasm that sets us off in this new direction, because nothing will ever be perfect unless we're looking at perfect imperfection. And that means that as long as we're willing to say there's going to be bumps, there's going to be hurdles, there's going to be side roads that we're going to travel, and be okay with that and allow the enthusiasm to still remain. Sometimes it will dim, but if we can keep it still going in some little piece or aspect, that's going to be the best part of it. So creating sustainable practices will help keep the motivation going when we encounter those setbacks that could lead to misalignment in our growth. Because one of the things that we need to understand is that some of those setbacks are part of the growth. They are part of the challenge. They are part of looking at where we are coming up against misalignment. And sometimes the misalignment is just in the stories that we say about ourselves. So it's really important that we remain open and that we see the challenge as part of the opportunity. So, the purpose of today's reading is to explore how our lived experiences become the foundation for sustainable engagement and growth of possibilities. And I'm going to start shuffling our question into the card. So, the question is, what new possibilities are you being asked to engage with sustainably? So, what new possibilities are you being asked to engage with sustainably? We'll shuffle it in, see how it feels. All right. Okay, let's pick our cards. Out one, two, three, four, five. All right, so here we go. So, what skill or expression is seeking refinement? And that's usually what these growth points and these possibilities and these opportunities are opening up. So, what skill or expression is seeking refinement? And here we have the Two of Swords. So, the skill that we're looking to refine at this point is our ability to understand crossroads. And what that means is our life is going to be filled with moments where we have choices. And the choice is going to have something leave our life as we move towards something else. And the thing that's important when we're looking to refine our ability to choose what's right for us is that we have the ability to clearly understand the stories behind the choices that we're making. And so you can see she's very representative to me of the justice figure. She's blindfolded and she has the swords and she is standing in front of a door, almost like kind of like a gatekeeper. And so it's really important that when we're looking at the crossroads that we're coming to, that we see them as these are those growth point opportunities. And our enthusiasm for these moments will help us to determine whether we are going at it in a growth mindset or whether we're coming at it from a fear or lack-based mindset. And so the more that we can cut out those limiting stories, the more that we can cut out those voices that diminish us in some capacity, that bring doubt into us, then we know that as we're moving forward and as we're opening up to these growth points, that we can also maintain that sustainability and we can commit to what's really important to us because we're grounded in who we are. The story that we're saying that is behind the choices that we're making is all about our confidence, our courage, our belief in our worth, our lovability. All of those things are going to help determine the stories that we say when we hit these crossroads. And if we have a fear-based story, then we're going to more likely choose one of the two paths that is going to placate other people, that is going to make other people happy, instead of choosing the path that is in alignment for us, that is going to boost us up, that's going to give us our courage, that's going to find our voice so that we can be able to speak about what it is that's important to us and what it is that we're looking to grow into. The next one we have is the one that sits in the north, so it sits above this the Two of Swords, and that's what structures support the physical needs of this skill or expression. So what structures do we need? And sometimes because it's sitting in the north, these might be physical structures. They might be habits or things that we need to do in order to support ourselves. They might be part of our environment. So what structures or supports in the physical need for this skill and expression? And here we have the Nine of Swords. So we got a bit of a sword theme going. So we're looking at how we're speaking, how we're talking, how we're thinking, how we're dealing with conflict, how we're dealing with clearing out a lot of those energetic frequencies of voice and expression. And so the Nine of Swords, that to me has always been the card of anxiety, the card of fear, more so of an external fear, right? Like the Eight of Swords is very much that I'm afraid of something, so I'm caging myself up. But there's situations that tend to happen where we have this huge anxiety, there's stress, there's overwhelm in here that there is someone else out there that we have to conform to. And I think that's the biggest thing between the difference between the Eight and the Nine of Swords is that the Eight of Swords is imagined fears, right? We will use an example of like phobias, right? Like so those are imagined fears that to us feel extremely real and extremely alive in the moment. Whereas the Nine of Swords, this is where there is an external stressor, there is an external source of conflict that we are extremely hyper aware of. And when we're looking at the structures and the physical needs that we need to have fill like to fulfill these expressions, what we need is we need to find physical habits, physical routines, physical environments where we can feel the anxiety and still feel safe. Because the thing is anxiety it avoided becomes a monster, right? Like it becomes this never-ending cycle and this undefeatable monster. But if we understand that the biggest barrier that we have right now is this anxiety. And the anxiety, especially when we're looking at growth and expansion, could be in what other people might say to us, what other people might think, the conflicts we might have to face about this, right? Like how do I explain myself to somebody that I look up to, that I'm deciding that I'm going to go and, live on a desert island somewhere because that's how I want to be. So we need to be able to have these places, these safe places where we can practice speaking, where we can practice, facing our anxiety. I think in some ways it's kind of like those in vivo when you have therapy and they have you go through like in vivo experiences, right? Like that's kind of what we're being asked is what is it that is really, really causing that stress and anxiety and find a safe place where you can practice dealing with this and like really allow yourself to embody these sensations, these feelings so that you become more comfortable with feeling them so that when you're actually in those stressful situations, they're not overwhelming the way that they can be. Next, we move down and we're going into the southern position. So we're looking at fire. And here we have what helps keep your enthusiasm alive. And here we have the Five of Coins. So this is interesting because sometimes the Five of Coins can also be seen very much as a card of lack. But one of the things that I'm going to point out here is that we have an Earth card in the fire position. So the thing that we're looking at to keep the enthusiasm alive is how are you using your resources, right? Like, so here you have this man who's got like receiving kind of like this one pentacle, and then there's this light and beautifulness that's shining down on him. And the thing is a lot of times the Five of Coins, like most fives, is a choice, right? Are you going to choose to see the resources that you have been maybe unable to see? Are you going to continue to sit in this position of feeling victim and feeling as if you are lacking things that other people have? And because it's in the fire, this is really going to impact that enthusiasm that we have. And so if you feel that your wings are being clipped, so to speak, or if you feel that where you're grounding into or where you're putting your resources is something that is going counter to the possibilities, it's a good time to look at, right? Where are you investing? Because the next card after this is the Six of Coins. And if you invest in the right places, then you start to receive the things that you are deserving and worthy of. Whereas if you are investing in the wrong places, you go back to the four, which then says, you need to start saving and you need to be really paying attention to what you're doing with your resources because there's not as much now as there was before. And it can kind of feed into, especially that Nine of Swords anxiety of, what do I do? And it's interesting that we started off with a choice card. We started off with that crossroads, and now we're at another one, only this is like a physical, right? Like, are you going to put that pottery, right? Because I always look at when you have an earth and a fire put together that like, are you going to take that pottery that you've made and put it in a kiln? And because maybe you're in a rush, you're going to turn the kiln up and bake it so hot that it breaks? Or are you going to allow things to develop over time and to take the time to be able to make those choices? And a lot of times that Two of Swords, that's what it says. It says, look, this is not something that you're meant to rush into. This is not a decision that you're supposed to make like really quick. and emotionally triggered, it needs to take time. You need to weigh everything. You need to look at what's going on. And that's what the Five of Coins is also telling us. And so to keep the enthusiasm alive, it's a lot about taking the time, really understanding the situation you're in, really understanding what you have available to you so that you can see, do I have what I need in order to maintain this commitment for like the long run? The next one, we're going to go over to the west, and what we have here is the water position. And the question we're asking is what elements of growth and expansion would best be supported through community? Because a lot of times that growth and expansion, we need someone else in order to understand where we're going, what we're doing. Because a lot of times, especially if we're dealing with these swords that's all in our head, that it gets really hard to be able to understand where physically we want to go. So now we're looking at and wow, we're like all in the swords here because we've got the two, then we jump to the nine, and now we have the 10. And it's also interesting that the 10 is coming right after that decision again of the five of coins, because what it's saying is that it's time maybe to leave behind some of the things that you thought were working, right? And we're looking specifically through the lens of community and the 10 of swords, right? Like the tens are all endings. They're all the ends of cycles. But what that's interesting is because we're also looking at growth and opportunities, the 10 leads into the ace, which is in the beginning of another cycle. And so when we're looking at the 10 of swords and how it's relating to like how we can best be supported through community, it's time. And as I said earlier, this growth piece can be very uncomfortable. And that's what the 10 of swords is coming in to say, is to say, look, the biggest conflict that you have right now is who you're in community with and what you're doing in that community, right? Like if you're in community, if you're in relationships, if you're with people that have you feeling beaten, put down, overwhelmed, like ready to just give everything up, because what they're doing when you're in these spaces is just perpetuating those stories of you're not good enough. You'll never get what you want. Here's the same old thing again. Look, you've created this same situation. You follow this same pattern. Well, if you're with the same people and you're hearing the same stories, then it makes sense that you're going to continue to cycle through this same kind of thing. And so the kind of the hard love that you have of the 10 of swords here is saying it's really time to look at what communities, what relationships, what situations in your life have outlived their purpose, their healthiness in your mind story. And it's time to maybe start breaking bonds with different people. And you know, it makes a lot of sense with the two of swords, because the two of swords is saying, maybe what's happening is the people that you're with are really having you out of alignment with what you know to be the truth for yourself. And so it's time to really start to I, in this case, I would say it's really time to stop lying to yourself and really start to find the best way to move yourself forward in that sense of telling the more authentic, the more aligned, the more honest story for yourself. And our final card over in the West, or sorry, the East, because we just did the West, is how is refinement and practice revealing misalignments and authenticity? Which is interesting, right? Because if we're looking at swords, right? Swords is all about authenticity over misalignment, right? Like truth over lies. And again, that's where we just ended with the 10 of swords. And so here we have, wow, this has been an interesting reading. So here we have the four of coins. And it's interesting because I was just talking about the four of coins and how the choices that we make at the five could send us back to the four. And what this is saying is that where we are right now on this growth is we're really having a bad, I don't want to say bad, a misunderstood use of our resources, right? So the resources that we have been gathering, maybe we were gathering them and had an idea on how to use them, and then all of a sudden, that project or that plan or that relationship or whatever that opportunity has become something different. And it all depends on how we've gone through these cards, right? So maybe what the four is, because the four is not necessarily a bad card. I would say that if we're looking at the five of coins and whatever decision we make at the five of coins sends us back to the four, then what the four is, it's the opportunity to look at things from a different point of view, to pivot, to understand what it is that you're building, what it is that you're growing, right? So if you have to go back, it could be, well, maybe the foundation you were building on needs a little bit more fine tuning, needs a bit of tweaking. Maybe there's some contacts, some resources, some connections that need to be gathered in order to be able to continue forward. And what I like about this is that the five is almost like a testing ground. It's saying, okay, let's test this. Ooh, something's missing. So let's go back to the four and see, right? It's troubleshooting, it's problem solving, because maybe it's less about I need to have all these resources and hoard all these resources, and more to go, well, you know what? I was planning on building a house that was 10 by 10, and maybe now I've realized I need to go 12 by 12. So I have the resources for a 10 by 10. Now I need to figure out how to get the extra 2 by 2 kind of space in order to build what it is that I want to build. Also, it might be a time to be looking at the way everything is aligning, right? Like, are the bricks going down? And you're noticing, oh my goodness, the ground is uneven. There's no level here. So my bricks are going up and then they're going down, and so my wall is going to be really crooked. That's what this is kind of coming back to. And it's saying, you know what? The only way that you can authentically move forward is if you go back and really understand where you're misaligned. And because it's the four of coins, right? You're misaligned in the way that you speak about the resources that you have, because we're in the east, and so we're looking at air. So you're misaligned in how you're using your resources, in how you're using the opportunities in the physical, the environments that you have, the people even as resources, the money that you have, all of those things, they're not being used to their full potential. And so one of the ways to be able to break free from that constant beating down of the Ten of Swords is to really sit back and say, how do I reclaim what is mine? What is my vision? How do I reclaim my environments? And how do I express that out to other people? Because we are dealing with the East here. So this has actually turned out to be quite an interesting spread of characters and cards. First off, there are no major arcanas in this week's reading, so that means to me that everything that's going on right now are more of the day-to-day choices that we're having. There's no big universal pressure being put on us to say, hey, pay attention over here. It just means that it's going to be day to day. And when we have two choice cards, right? Two pressure points, and we have the end of a cycle showing up, that means that there is something that's going on that is coming to an end, and it's going to be really important for us to be able to pay attention to where we're making choices, the kind of choices that we're making, and whether they're going to be moving us forward or whether they're going to be moving us back, because we do have um, a bit of back and forth going, right? So we go from the 2 to the 9, then we go back to the 5, then we go forward to the 10, and then we jump back again to the 4. And so there is a lot of back and forth going on here, but it seems to be that it's more like when I look, like, so the biggest jump is from the 2 to the 9, but then the 9 goes back 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. So it goes back 4, and then we go up 4, and then go back 5, right? So they're not like, these cards here are not big jumps. So what it reminds me of is, like if you're panning for gold and you have like the gold sieve, and you're just basically kind of back and forth, or when you have baking and you're kind of tapping on the flour, what you're doing is you're looking at how, and it makes a lot of sense because you have the 2, which is like, it's connected to, if you can look here, it's got Libra, right? And it's very balanced. It's very much about this or that, and finding that right way. And then you have the cards that are basically jumping back and forth. So it's like, do I try this? Do I try that? Do I try this? Do I try that? So it is a very interesting spread that we have. The other thing that I will point out is that all of the cards in this week's readings were either swords or pentacles, which means that what comes to mind with that is put your money where your mouth is. That's really the message that's coming out of this, is that make sure that what you're doing with your resources is in alignment and in integrity with what you're saying with your words, or what you're not saying, right? Look at the places where you might be saying mistruths, or where you might be misleading yourself, others, you know, there's not a lot of deception coming up in here because we didn't have the Seven of Swords, but there is this idea that what's going on is this, and I love that it goes back to the Two of Swords, because I get the feeling what's going on is like, yeah, I'm going to go this way, and then something happens like, well, maybe I'll come back. And because, and this is what makes it really nice, is like, so you say, okay, this is what this, I can't say this, but maybe I'll do this. And then it's like, oh, but I don't know, I can't say that. Oh, maybe I'll do this, right? So the more that you struggle with what you're physically doing versus what you're saying or not saying, that's going to lead to what the crux is of this crossroad that you're at. And the more you can kind of feel into that, because there is a lot of that bodiness, the more you can feel into it, the more you can understand what stories in your head are yours and which ones are misaligned and need to be, kind of released. So I hope this was kind of an interesting read, but I hope that you enjoyed this week's reading, that you got something out of it, and that you will come back next week for the next one. In the meantime, take care, and I will see you around the webs.